Welcome to Soul Elevation, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin. This is a great episode with author and energy healer Inna Segal. She has remarkable things to share about how she healed her own body, including the spontaneously awakening ability to see inside her body, and how she helps others to heal by seeing inside their bodies and the communication she receives from the body in terms of when and why symptoms developed. And we also get into spiritual topics relating to the development of the soul. Inna Segal is a pioneer in the field of energy medicine and human consciousness and the best-selling author of The Secret Language of Your Body. Her journey began after years of illness and the tragic stillbirth of her child, which led her to discover a profound ability to heal herself. From that turning point, she dedicated her life to helping others transform pain into freedom. For over 25 years, Inna has worked with people worldwide, from doctors and psychologists to trauma survivors and creatives, teaching how to uncover the true roots of suffering and restore health through the wisdom of the body and soul. So we'll begin very shortly, but first I want to gently invite you to explore everything available for you at karagoodwin.com. It's truly a sanctuary of support for your spiritual journey. You'll find my book, Your Authentic Awakening, a beautiful library of free guided meditations and resources to help you deepen your connection with your higher self. And you can also discover the summits, workshops, and live experiences that are coming up, all created to help you expand your consciousness and connect with a community of like-hearted souls. And I want to say a heartfelt thank you for supporting the show. Your likes, comments, shares, and subscriptions genuinely help this work reach more people. When you engage, you help uplift the frequency of the content and make it easier for others to find these conversations. So you can go ahead and hit that like button right now. All right, let's begin. Enjoy this episode. Well, Inna, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you today. Thanks for coming on Soul Elevation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start by talking about your journey into the world of energy medicine.
Well, for me, I think it's a journey that a lot of people have gone through, I would say, and I think relate to, where you're just constantly sick and then, you run around going from one. Originally, for me, it was from one medical practitioner to another, and then it was from one alternative practitioner to another, which I really believe in some ways helped the end result. But whilst I was in I would say, in that sense of you're the one who's responsible for my health and I don't have anything to do with it. I'm literally just, I don't know anything. I'm just the one that shows up and takes the peel or, has whatever work done on them. I don't participate. I don't do anything. For me, that just wasn't working. And I spent years and years going to different practitioners for everything from back pain in particular, that was the most painful, to digestive issues, to anxiety, psoriasis all over my skin. And I felt like the turning point was really when I showed up at this chiropractor's office and he said to me, "Your body's stuck." And I said, "Yeah, I'm familiar with that part of it." But I don't think I really understood it. I knew that I was in pain, but and that I wasn't getting better, but I really didn't understand what stuck meant at that moment. And he said, "Well, your body actually wants to be stuck. There's nothing I can do for you. Go home." And at that point, I was enraged and I couldn't believe that he could say that to me. But I also later on realized that it took a lot for him to say that. He had known me for quite a while by that stage. And he needed to do something to shake me up because I just wasn't moving forward in the way that I needed to. And so on the way home, I was angry, and I was also reflecting on his words. Um, I had been studying to be a professional writer, so I'd been doing a lot of different classes at that stage around, in particular, literature and linguistics. And I was doing research, and I had written a lot of different articles. I had done lots of interviews, and it was kind of occurring to me that when I would write, I would research things and I would connect lots of pieces together to write articles or to, when I was working for different magazines, but I wasn't doing that. I was going, kind of like a bull straight ahead and just really wanting someone else to do the work. And so I realized that the thing that I hadn't done was that I hadn't actually worked on self healing. I hadn't really taken responsibility in that sense, not necessarily for what happened to me to lead to this, but what I could do. And so I made a decision that I was going to do that. So when I went home, I decided that I was going to heal myself. I didn't really know how to do that, but I thought I'm just going to start with the basics. I'm going to place my hand on on my back, and I'm going to start breathing with with the pain, as opposed to what I had done most of the time, which I'd realized, which was trying to avoid the pain by
Mm.
holding my breath as much as possible. So as I was doing that, and it was painful, my mind started to go into all sorts of negativity. So I realized that I needed to do something like counting backwards from 30, which is what I did. And as I was doing that, it occurred to me that maybe I should ask for help, like divine help. And so, since I was very conflicted around this whole issue, I said, if there is something divine out there, then I'm asking for help and I would like help now. I had zero expectations at this point of anything happening, but I felt like this warmth was moving into my body, and almost as if I was starting to unwind from deep inside myself.
Mm.
And then it occurred to me to ask if, and it was just the strangest thing because it had never occurred to me, but I asked, what if I could see into my body, what would it look like? And again, there was no real kind of time to adjust or a thought that it was going to happen. But within a few moments, I could see into my back, like I had kind of
Wow.
activation.
Really? That's so cool.
So, original reaction to that was a bit of a fright, but then I thought to myself, okay, so why do I have this? By that stage, I was about 20 years old. Why do I have this? I really want to understand. And within moments, the best way to describe this is I was seeing a vision with memory, with wisdom. And I could see, I was born in Eastern Europe. So when I came to Australia, I literally did not know more than a couple of words of English. So maybe knew how to say hello and goodbye and toilet. and, and so um, when I went to school, I was bullied, and I definitely was not coming from the right place in the world for me to be accepted. And so I cried every day, and within a short period of time, I noticed that I started getting psoriasis. Now,
Mm.
people would say, well, actually, your grandfather had it, my dad still has it, his sister, twin sister, was covered with it. So it's genetic. But what was really clear, and so I accepted it because that's what everybody said. But what was very clear to me in that experience was that it wasn't genetic at all. It was actually triggered by the fact that I did not feel comfortable in my own skin. And prior to that, I was a very outgoing child. We had lived in Italy for about 10 months, and I really felt loved. I really felt accepted. I felt like I could express myself in whatever way that I needed to express myself in. And I was very creative. But when I came to Australia, all of that got shut down. And I just actually didn't know who I was, who I was meant to be. I definitely did not feel comfortable in my own skin. And so that became very clear to me that the whole psoriasis was caused for me in that scenario by that, or triggered by it. So, I do believe that we have, when people say genetics, we essentially have the capacity to become sick based on the fact that we're much more prone to that
Mhm.
particular ailment, but we don't have to. And because, again, my brother never did, he never had that. So I feel like, it really depends so much on what's happening in your life and how you process it as well. So to me, it was quite a shock to come from a place where I was accepted and loved into the complete and utter opposite of that. My brother was a lot younger, so he didn't have the same experience in that sense. So as I acknowledged this, and I really allowed myself to feel, I really allowed myself to cry and work through this. The next thing that occurred was that I realized that my back pain was very much connected to a variety of aspects of. I didn't feel that my parents were in an enormous constant conflict over the time where I started getting back pain, which was around 14 to 15. They were so at each other's throats, so to speak, that it was very difficult to be in the house. They were constantly fighting to actually express to them, that I changed schools by then, and that there was a very different type of experience that I was going through. I could now speak English, so that wasn't the issue. But the issue was that this was a private school. Most of the people in the private school, besides me and my friends who came from Eastern Europe, had come from extremely wealthy households, and they did not like having us there. And so they bullied us from a very, very different perspective. And I just did not feel that my parents were even in a place to hear anything like that. They were too into their own challenge of being, again, in a new country, and also their own relationship. And so I started to feel this deep sense of unsupportedness from the school environment. I had teachers who were essentially giving me much lower marks than I deserved because they felt that they could, because I was an Australian. And I also had bullying. And I just felt like, as much as my mum was trying to be there for me and my brother, she consciously was somewhere else most of the time. And so even when there were very important issues, her responses in that particular period of time were very unsupportive in my experience at the time. So that became clear, and wasn't so much of a blame as an understanding. Again, I just allowed myself to feel through it and cry through it. And then the other thing that I had that was really a huge problem was digestive issues. And it became, again, very clear to me that they were connected to my grandparents, in particular my grandmother, who had lost a lot of members of her family and had gone through enormous amount of trauma. She had survived in Eastern Europe by herself for 4 years of the war. Her mother was actually a clairvoyant who told her when she was about maybe 12 that during the war she would be the only person, the only child that would survive, and that her father might come back from the war but wouldn't be well, and the rest of the children, she was one of 8, would die, including her mother. And so I don't really know how you take that as a 12-year-old, but around the age of 13, my grandmother's mother was killed in front of her to save my grandmother's life. And my grandmother then couldn't talk about this experience for about 50 years. And around the time that I just turned 20, I had my own loss of a child where I was pregnant, and the baby, I kept being told that everything was okay, even though there was some part of me that didn't feel like that was the case, especially towards the end. And then at about 8.5 months pregnant, I gave birth and the child died. And so to me, that experience kind of exploded everything else. But it was very obvious also that all my digestive issues exploded, and that the fact that I'd had this since I was a young child was connected to ancestral sense of loss then meets my own loss. And I guess after all of this and understanding that I was just a sponge, I would just take on people's energy. I fell asleep, and it was probably the deepest sleep that I'd had for years and years. And when I woke up, I was very clear that there was about my pain was had improved by 70%, and something had woken up in me that was different. And whilst I was still skeptical, there was a desire to keep going, to keep learning, to keep connecting the pieces. And so over the next several weeks, I journaled. Again, being a writer, that's something that I would do. So I kept journaling, and connecting lots of pieces together. And so by the end of maybe 3 weeks, all my psoriasis disappeared, all the back pain disappeared, my anxiety went right down, my digestive issues improved, but that took years, and I still have to be very conscious of what I eat. And I realized that I could also tune in and see into other people's bodies. So this is kind of how it was very life changing as an experience.
Wow. Oh my word. Well, thank you so much for taking us through all of that. I mean, it's really fascinating. And I wondered as you were talking about the awakening of being able to see your back in almost like an X-ray type of thing. It made me wonder if that was the first sort of psychic, phenomenon that you'd experienced. But as you continued to talk, it sounded like maybe, well, definitely your grandmother had something, but you had that skeptical aspect of you that you were kind of like, yeah, I'm experiencing this, but I'm not sure what's going on and all of that. But were you brand new to psychic perception as you were going through all of this, or were you kind of comfortable with that?
I definitely wasn't comfortable with that. I had a few prior experiences where my partner at the time was quite spiritual, and he took me to various alternative practitioners, including some that did channeling. I have to say the channeling experience was not a good one for me. I actually found it to be quite traumatizing in the experience that I personally had with it. So that,
And somebody was channeling for
yeah,
you, or
well,
you
channeling, I
experienced
was in a group. Yeah, I was in a group
okay.
where somebody was channeling, and it was actually extremely aggressive as an experience, where the
Really?
person who was channeling was very harsh, was going through each person in a group and saying things that were very inappropriate and kind of attacking people to a point. I was 18 at the time, to a point where I remember having a complete panic attack by the time she got to me, and the things that she was saying was lies and inappropriate and harmful, and I just felt so stuck that I to the couldn't get out. So there was that aspect of it where I was very shaken, I'm going to say, by having an experience with somebody that was meant to be so calling themselves love and light. That to me was quite shocking. And but again, that was an experience in a group that I had been in. An experience that I had personally was when I realized that the child had died. I was in absolute shock, and I remember thinking there must be something really wrong with me, because no one has talked about the fact that this really happens in Australia. So I assumed that this happened to people who lived either in third world countries or somehow, people who weren't well. And so I started thinking to myself, there's something wrong with me, because, how does this happen in Australia? And I asked everybody to leave the room, I think, except my partner at the time. And I remember just staring at the ceiling, not just being in shock, not really thinking of anything. And I within, I couldn't tell you how long, but maybe half an hour, because time obviously stops, but maybe around that time, there was an angelic being, a very feminine one, who appeared to me. And that was definitely the first experience I had that was very clearly, this is what it is in terms of psychic. Before that, I would just have feelings, but I thought everybody else had them about things. But this was so clear, and this angel said, "Don't worry, you will have children soon." Because there was definitely a part of me that went, maybe I shouldn't. Like, there's something wrong. Like, how would I have children again? And showed me a boy and a girl, and said, everything's going to be okay. Don't worry. And for the next, again, I'm going to say around 3 hours, I felt so at peace. I just remember feeling the most peaceful sense of everything's okay. I'm somehow going to use this experience to help people. I'm going to have children. Everything's going to be fine. But after 3 hours, that kind of dissipated, and I went back into feeling anxious, victim like, not wanting to be here, and so on.
Wow. Well, first of all, where were you in Italy? Where were you located for those 10 months?
It was around 30 kilometers from Rome, in a tiny little village town that had, by the sea, and it was just beautiful.
Wow. I spent 4 years in Bologna, so northern Italy. So I just wondered if it was in the same sort of area, but you were further south. But I share just, I mean, it's such a special place. So
Yeah.
I love that you have experience there too.
Yeah.
So
Well,
what is it like when you talk about the being able to see inside your body or in somebody else's body, and you explain it like an X-ray, but you're actually, because some people who have that gift, they might see energy, or they may see just blockages, or they may see more of like the chakra system or the Chinese meridian system. Is there a way to describe it so that people can understand what that's like for you?
absolutely. I'm gonna say that it's always different. Actually, the X-ray experience was mainly for myself. That hasn't
Mm.
been as much in the same way for other people. It occasionally can be, but when I'm essentially tuning into somebody, usually what I'm doing is I'm trying to connect to their own. soul, and I will ask questions like, show me the starting point, because most people, especially when they're in pain, they're feeling things, but they're feeling things at a particular kind of area inside their bodies, and not necessarily where it started and not necessarily all the aspects. And so what I would do is go, where where is the starting point for me to build a picture and to build a map, so that I can start to understand all the different intricacies and details of why they have what they have. Because just seeing one aspect of it, and I'll usually say, please don't tell me much. I'll be the one who'll ask you questions, and I'll ask you questions that are important for me to understand. And so, for instance, as I'm kind of scanning and tuning in, I might see somebody's lower back and it will be literally circled. And then I'll I'll hone in on that, and I'll start going, where is it that I'm seeing it? Is it more on the left or the right? Because though that gives me a lot of information. And so I might ask them a question, and rather than, I never say statements. I cannot stand that. I also feel like, that's something doctors do. And, I just, one, I'm not a doctor. And two, I just think that it can be I found people can become quite reactive from that, as opposed to, even if I know the answer, and usually I do know the answer, 99% of the time I do, I'll be like, so um, I'm seeing your lower back, and, you know, can you let me know, is it more in the left or the right? I might say I'm seeing it more in the left, but I'll open it up in a sense, because people don't always, there's pain that refers as well. So they don't always know clearly where it's actually coming from. And so then I'll say, so then we'll start exploring, and I'll go, okay, so the feeling there. So then I never usually go for the feeling first, even though I have that capacity, mainly because I found that feeling, as opposed to seeing, is can can at times be confusing, because unless you have really, really worked on yourself and refined yourself, you don't actually know if it's your own feeling or if it's the other person's feeling. You don't know where it ends or begins. And I just find studying with feelings most of the time, again, for me, is not accurate enough. So, um, so I focus on seeing, but there are people who are amazing when it comes to feelings. So I don't want to say that it's just for me. I'm, much more clear in that sense. And but it is really important to understand, to guide people. And so I'll say, okay, what I'm feeling, let's say, is maybe a sense of fear or unsafety. And because I've also broken up the body from years and years and years of experience into timelines of where things are most likely to start in terms of timelines, especially if it's a chronic pain, as opposed to, something you just have for, a couple of days, then I'll usually say, okay, well, I'm aware that things start at this particular time, this particular age. What was happening in your life at that in that timeline? And I also ask when the pain did start and what was happening then, because what people don't understand is that we're constantly recycling. So every 7 years we're going through a cycle where we're repeating things that we have not dealt with prior so maybe we dealt with something with the capacity that we had, but not from another perspective or a deeper perspective, or a way that is really important for us now. So and so for that reason, I really go into this deeper exploration, and trying to connect the pieces for the person. And then usually as I'm exploring this, another part of their body will show up. So it might be their right knee. And I'll start to go, oh, so from the lower back, let's say on the left side, now it's going to the right knee. Okay, what is the piece that is connecting that? And so again, we'll have a conversation, and then it might go to the neck, and I'll go, oh, okay, that's interesting. And so as I'm doing that, I'm usually writing down a lot of notes, trying to understand the whole connection, and I'm also writing down what are the processes that I would work with this particular person that could help them, so that by the end of the kind of the tuning in process, I have a pretty good understanding of where we're at and what to do.
That's so fascinating. So, I know you're the author of The Secret Language of the Body, of Your Body. Um, and I think you've given some of it away in what you've just shared. But tell us about The Secret Language of the Body.
So when I was writing the book, and I'm going to say the reason I wrote it, and the reason I actually write any book when I choose to, is because I feel like there needs to be more awareness of a particular topic, or an exploration of it that is deeper than before. I'm quite familiar usually that, you know, there are other people who open the door. And so for me, I was very aware that Louise Hay had opened the door. I was very, very grateful for the fact that she did. But and there were a few others who'd written books that had that theme, I'm gonna say. But as somebody who was working with people as a practitioner, and I'm that person that needs detail, and I was like, this is a great foundation, but I feel like I need to help people to understand all the layers and key concepts of how they heal themselves, because that's really where I came from. I tuned into my body and I healed myself. And so I wanted to create a book, and I guess not just a book, but a body of work where people could learn how to work within their own bodies and soul. And so I started with going, if I was somebody who was in the position where I was in when I started, what would I need and want? And so I started writing the book with actually teaching people how to start to communicate with their own bodies, understanding that I had, for each part of the body in the second section of the book, I had written quite extensive processes. In most of the other books that were available at the time, there were no processes, there were affirmations. And I really felt like maybe, in the 70s and early 80s, and I've heard you talk about this, we were kind of like open and capable of maybe of changing through more subtle ways, through repeating an affirmation. But by the time that I was doing this, which was in I think 2000 whatever, it was it just wasn't working. There needed to be layers and depth and understanding of, and questions, and maybe pressure points and breathing and visualizations, and a combination, and movement, and a touch combination of everything, rather than just repeating an affirmation, which I tried many a time and just did not find it helpful to me personally. And so I wanted people to understand that. And so I explained why I created processes in that particular way. And so, because one of the other things, I have a section for diseases as well in the book, but I realized I couldn't, the way that the medical system and the pharmaceutical companies work, you cannot, put something together for a particular disease, you know, and say this is what it is without being sued or, having
Attacked.
consequences.
Yeah.
Right? So I had to be a little bit more clever in the sense of going, well, if you have a disease, there's something going on with your body. So why not work with that part of your body, or combine working with several parts of the body? And so I wrote about emotions as well. I wrote about color healing. I wrote about systems of the body, and how all of this was connected for us to work with and understand our bodies. And I guess the idea of the book was both for practitioners of every modality, which is actually what I did. I sent it to people, from every modality. And also, I wanted anybody to pick it up who was open to it and to self healing, and have a way to start working on themselves.
That's so beautiful. That's amazing. So you also get in, part of your work is getting into the different layers of the spiritual world. And I wanted to be sure that we talked about this too, because I find this so fascinating. So can you talk a little bit about your understanding of the layers of the spiritual world, and then how you perceive them, or how you get your intel?
So, I I think I heard you talk about in one of the podcasts about connecting to, was it Yogananda?
Hmm.
And it's funny because that was my starting point as well on my journey, or one
Oh,
of. And I was really, really kind of fascinated by the Eastern way of connecting and exploring. And I did a lot of satsangs, which is sitting in truth, and all sorts of things for, I would say maybe 12 years from when I was first introduced to all of this. And then there was a sense that I just kept getting, like there was more to it. I'm one of those people, I feel like I have more of a scientific type brain. I need details. I'm not good when it comes to generalizations. And so, or things being said as kind of as a whole without having really, really clear details. So, when I was, again, in my kind of early 30s, I started to get this feeling like something was just blocking me to going further. And I was familiar, I'm going to say, with all the kind of spiritual concepts that were popular and available, and had also met a lot of authors, a lot of people during my own speaking and traveling around the world and teaching. And I just felt like there must be more. There must be more to it than this. And I ended up connecting to this older lady who was German and was teaching something called eurythmy. And I'd never really heard of eurythmy, but she was a student of Rudolf Steiner. And she was saying to me, look, if you are essentially looking for more depth and for detail and for understanding why we're here, what we're about, where we're going, you might want to look at his work and dive into it. I mean, it's very, very complex and not easy. And whilst I had enormous amount of resistance to that, I'm going to say, I went, okay, show me. And then over time, something occurred in me where I think I was married to a man at the time who was also really interested in that type of work. And we just both started diving into it, and everything started kind of making so much more sense in terms of the layers of understanding the soul, the spirit, everything that I had seen had began making so much more sense to me. And I literally felt like that restriction kind of completely released. And I thought it was interesting because when I was listening to one of your podcasts, you were saying about people leaving 100 years ago, and which is when Real China lived, and certain things not necessarily being kind of connected or relevant to the present. But what was really interesting with someone like Rudolf Steiner was that he kept talking about what would happen 100 years from now, and what would happen
Really?
200 years from now, what would happen 300 years, what would happen 1,000 years from now. And so because he was a scientist and a clairvoyant, and you know, he he was able to talk about things, let's say in medicine, that is only being discovered right now or that occurred very recently. And so for me, I still think that there are obviously aspects, that need to be kind of brought into the present. And he always spoke about that as well. But the details around the spiritual world, about what happens in the spiritual realm, about um, how we got to be who we are, who were the beings involved, how we evolve, how the soul evolves, because most people don't know the basics of the fact that the soul didn't just become the way it is now, that over thousands of years it evolved from being, from thinking, having an ability to think during the time of Abraham. And before that, we didn't know how to. Abraham was the first person that could do 1 + 1 = 2. Before that, our thinking was completely different. And so our soul started to evolve in terms of understanding the mental aspects of life in what we might call mathematics or science now. And that took a long time. And then the emotional aspect, and then, more of the kind of we're now in the time of the consciousness soul, where we're able to start to touch divinity in a different way through our own morality, through our own wisdom, through our own freedom of choice, and understand and choose to want to understand the spiritual world, as opposed to only kind of focusing on the materialistic world from the perspective we're in. And again, I'm generalizing a lot in what I'm saying, but
Hmm.
I wrote a book called Understanding Modern Spirituality from that whole perspective, that now, even though I take really kind of deep old mystery school concepts and unpack them, I'm also saying in the past there was less choice. You had to go to church, or you had to go to synagogue, or you had to go to the mosque, or you had to, whatever religion you were part of, your family kind of pushed you towards it. And what's different in our modern spirituality is that I don't have to. I may want to, I may choose to, but I do not have to, right? And so there is this sense of well, if I can discover, what will I discover? Where will I look? We went through several years recently where we were forbidden to ask questions, which for someone like myself pushed me to ask a lot more questions.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're in the time where we're meant to be asking questions. We're meant to be delving deeper than what's been kind of accessible to us before. And I think that's what modern spirituality is really about.
Mm, beautiful. Wow, well, this has just been fascinating. You have so many insights and I really appreciate your perspective. It's very unique the gifts that you have and that you share. So, thank you so much for coming on. Please tell people how they can connect with your work.
So the best way is to go to my website, which is innasegal.com, INNASEGAL.com. And there's a lot to explore. But what I'm really encouraging people at this point to go to explore is my masterclasses, because I chose, which are kind of like mini workshops. And what I've done is that over the last few years, I've focused on particular topics, starting from the basics of understanding the body to going deeper into understanding chakras, archetypes, timelines, cycles, which is my 10-day course, Awaken the Healer Within. So the masterclasses are kind of a way into understanding yourself without, at this point, having to invest financially. Because I wanted to take away people's resistance, because we all have some reason why we don't do it. It will change, because I always used to charge for people to kind of like start these mini workshops and understand them. So this will change at some point soon. But while, people can, I really encourage you to give yourself, some of the masterclasses are 2 hours long, some are 4 hours, but give yourself an opportunity to do the class, grab a journal. Each class contains very powerful processes. And when I say this, I mean, there's several there that allow you to tune in and go and explore inside yourself. And so many people have said to me, oh my God, I didn't think that I would go this deep. I feel the difference. Wow, this is how you do it. And that's kind of the key to it. And then if you love that and you go, you know what, I am ready, I want to learn more, then again we share how you can go further. But yeah, that's probably the best way is to go to innasegal.com, or you could go to just straight to, if you're wanting to dive deep in, straight to innasegal.com/masterclass and explore and really give yourself that time to connect. Because at the end of the day, unless you connect within yourself, you'll never really know who you are. And I feel like healing is a way into spirituality and depth of who you truly are, and it changes everything.
Beautiful. So well said. Well, thank you so much, Ina. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for coming on Soul Elevation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Soul Elevation. If someone in your life would be inspired or uplifted by what you heard today, please take a moment to share it with them. These are the kinds of conversations that ripple out and elevate collective consciousness. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the powerful episodes ahead. Your presence, your energy, and your support truly help amplify this mission of raising frequency and anchoring in a more awakened humanity. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you for the next episode of Soul Elevation.